Welcome back to another episode of the Business Fundamentals podcast. My name is Lester Philander, your host, and today we are talking sales. Now, sales is arguably one of the most important skills that you need to develop or outsource or just get the basic understanding of if you're starting your own business, if you want to take things to the next level, or if you are an employee to a company where your primary function is to do sales. Now, a lot of people ask me over the years, Lester, I'm not a good salesperson, I'm not good at speaking to people, I'm a bit shy, I'm a bit introverted, and they're always posed with the question, do I upskill myself in sales or do I outsource it? Or when I say outsource, in other words, do we give it to someone else? Do we delegate it? And we need to ask ourselves a series of questions. And today we're going to go through some of those questions to identify if outsourcing or delegating is the best option for you, or if upskilling is the best option for you. Now, before we always worked on this metric that if it's a hard skill or functional skill, like marketing, financial management, human resources, if that is something that you don't necessarily do well, then it would be in your interest to outsource it or to delegate it to someone who actually has the ability to do that with the least amount of resistance, so that you can maximize the input, or so that you can maximize the output at the end of that process. When it comes to soft skills like people management, understanding where we are, looking at certain things, those are usually things that I would say is a soft skill, and soft skills I would say is in your interest to develop yourself. I use myself as an example. In high school, I was probably one of the slowest readers in my class. I knew that I'd use my voice to make money for me someday, so reading and becoming affluent was something I needed to invest in. And from time to time I get trolled, and people always ask, why do you have this rah-rah accent? And I usually kick back in saying that I made more money with a white accent in a colored community than I did with a colored accent in a white community. And that, I'll talk a bit about that as we go on in this process today. But the question we need to ask ourselves, and we need to really unpack, is do we outsource or delegate the sales process? Or do we upskill ourselves so that we ourselves can be a better salesperson? Now, before we can make a decision, we need to look at a plethora of different things that we need to take into account. In fact, before we make any decisions, we need to assess all the information that we have at our disposal, really analyze it so that we can make the best possible decision. As I mentioned in the previous podcast, business owners make thousands of decisions on a daily basis. And I think Jeff Bezos, in his final few years of being the CEO of Amazon, he said that his goal, his job, is to make 3 big decisions every single day. You cannot waste your decision-making power on small things like, what do I need to wear today, which is why having a uniform might be in your best interest. But, you have something called decisional fatigue. And if you're making too many decisions, by the time you have to make a big, impactful decision that changes the trajectory of the business, then you might not be able to make as good of a decision as you'd like to, because you've used all of your decision-making energy on things that might not be that instrumental to the business. Okay, so let's look at some of these things that we need to take into account before we actually start making these decisions. So the first one you need to ask yourself is, what is the business model? Is your business model a B2B business, or is it a B2C business? Now, if it's a B2B business, it means that you are selling to other businesses, and you can get a little more technical because you have things like B2B2C. So in other words, if you're selling to the wholesaler and the wholesaler is selling to the end user, that could be a B2B2C. But for the purpose of simplicity, let's just categorize them into the 2 main categories, which is B2B and B2C. So if you are a B2B business, that means that you're building product or you're selling services to other businesses, not directly to the end user. A B2C business is when you have a retail shop front and you are selling to the customer directly. If you are a retail store, for example, that means you're trying to sell to as many customers as your inventory allows. So you tend to sell a little to a lot of people. That is B2C. And when it is a B2C business model, you tend to lead with marketing and sales follows. Let me give you an example. Again, with a clothing retail store. If you are selling to the end user, let's say you're selling ladies' shoes, for example. So you're not going to go door to door and sell your shoes to as much ladies as you possibly can. You're going to lead with marketing, whether it's social media marketing, whether it's radio advertising, whether it's newspaper advertising, whether it's TV advertising, if the budget allows. that is how you get customers to come into the store. And once they've come into the store, that is when the sales transaction actually starts. With B2B, you tend to lead with sales. In other words, if you are a highly industrial engineering company and you're selling to the construction industry that employs, let's say, more than 500 staff members, or they build buildings that is in excess of 50 floors, then there are only 2 to 3 companies or construction companies that builds that type of structure more than 50 floors. Instead of you paying a radio station and spending 50 to 60,000 rand on an advertising campaign that might reach 900,000 people, it would be a wasted expense. Rather go directly to the person that you are looking to sell to. And that means that that process is very sales intensive. That does not mean that there's no marketing involved. In this case, the marketing is a little more reactive as opposed to proactive. So proactive marketing would be social media marketing, getting things out there, basically things that will fetch the client from where they are, bring them to you. But when it comes to reactive marketing, it means that you are taking yourself to the client, selling what it is you are offering there, and before they make a decision, they will do some research on you. So they'll look at things like your website, your company profile, testimonials, previous companies that you've done work for. So that all forms part of reactive marketing. So if it's a market proactive business, in other words, it's a B2C business, then you can rely a little bit more on marketing and less on sales. So if you're not that good of a salesperson, you can leverage that on marketing so that marketing can go fetch the clients for you. And once the clients are there, there's a higher chance of you converting them into a client than you trying to start this process from scratch. When people come into the door, there's some sort of verbal or tacit commitment that I'm coming here either not to buy today, but to buy tomorrow or sometime in the future. How you collect that information, that will be a different podcast altogether, because when it comes to funneling and sales processes and the back end processes with regard to sales, that will take up too much time if we go into too much detail with regard to those things today. But when we do a talk on administration and systems in the future, all of those things will come into play with regard to that as well. So that is the first question you need to ask yourself. Is it a B2B business model, or is it a B2C? The next question is, what exactly are you selling? Now keep in mind that what you are selling and what your customer is buying are not the same thing. If you are an alarm installation company, you're not selling alarm systems in the mind of the customer. In the mind of the customer, they are buying a sense of security, peace. It could be that they've come from a trauma where someone has broken into their house and now they're not really sure, okay, how do I do this? How do I prevent something like this from happening? And what they're looking to buy is the sense of peace, the sense of security. So if you're going to go in there and talk about all the fancy features that your alarm system has, you might lose that sale because you're not really understanding why customers are looking to buy what they are buying. So understand where they are, speak into their need, and then communicate from that perspective. So often as salespeople, we are wired to say certain things at certain times, and we end up just shoving what we think customers need down their throat instead of just listening. And one of the most important things as a salesperson is to listen, to really understand. And once you've understood where they are, bring your tone, bring your body language, bring your energy to that level. The reason you want to do that is you want to connect with them. You want them to feel like they are heard. You want them to feel like they are understood. As soon as you feel that I have the perfect solution for the problem that you have, you've already lost them. You sound like a salesperson. Everybody wants to buy, but nobody wants to be sold to. So the sales process is such a sensitive one that the smallest thing that you do wrong can change the entire trajectory. And sometimes if you're sitting and you feel that, I have the perfect solution for what you are facing, and you come in with this arrogant, I know what you need kind of approach, and you say the wrong thing and they pull their face in a certain way, that kind of throws you off completely. So take the time to understand, listen, hear them, look where they are, and speak from that perspective. I mean, if I'm a person that is looking to buy a vehicle and I go there, the last thing I want to hear is that this is the car that will suit you. This car, you will look good in this car. If you are a car salesman or salesperson, you'd want to understand, are you a family man? How many people do you have? How often do you drive? Do you drive more than 15 kilometers on a daily basis? What is your after hours activities? Do you enjoy going camping? Get as much information as you possibly can, and then recommend a few options, but also ask them, what is your preferred vehicle? What is your preferred brand? What is your preferred shape? What is your preferred engine capacity? Based on the information that you can collect, from there you can make an informed recommendation, and that is how you build that level of rapport. Those are some of the sales languages that we use. So understand what it is you're selling, because what you're selling and what people are buying are two different things. The third question you want to ask yourself is, are you selling contextually or are you selling contextually? Let me give you an example. This here is a cup. Right, so if somebody sells a cup and they speak about all the benefits of this cup, so it sits nicely in my hand and it's big enough for a guy of my appetite, whatever the case is, that is contextual selling. Contextual selling is taking everything else into account. So why this cup? What you put in the cup? What kind of weather is conducive for you to drink coffee? You know, it's everything that happens outside, and most of the time we take for granted that context plays a big role in the customer's decision-making process. When we watch the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio had one scene who played Jordan Belfort. The famous scene was "Sell me this pen," and everybody in the movie tried to talk about the contextual features of the pen. You know, it sits nicely in your hand, or it's smooth on the page, or whatever the case is. Most of the people couldn't really get over that advantage line, because a pen is a pen. When you sell contextually, you talk about all the other things that involves that sales process. Now, if someone had to ask me to sell this pen, firstly, I would paint a picture of myself as an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 10 years, and as most entrepreneurs, we're all waiting for that big break, that one deal, that one handshake. And by the time someone presents you with a contract that's going to change the trajectory of your business, that change the outlook on where you are, that momentous occasion, that iconic moment, you know, when you put that pen to paper, you don't want to take out some bitten off, chewed on big pen. You know, you'd want a pen of signature and significance that kind of brings that moment into a state of memorabilia that, you know, makes people feel, wow, all of a sudden it's not a pen anymore. It's something that symbolizes the switch from one season into another. So that is the difference between contextual selling, which is the content of the product, and contextual selling, which is everything around the product. Now, maybe that is a bit of a foolish example, and I'm sure in your industry you can come up with good contextual examples, but please understand that that is a big part of the sales process, bringing everything else into that process over there as well. The next thing you need to ask yourself is, in the business, are you the entrepreneur? Are you the salesperson? Are you the engineer? In other words, you are at the forefront of what the product can do and what it's supposed to do for you and why it is you're looking to buy it. Or are you just the manager? Now, each of these people could have some sort of sales role within the process. Even the delivery guy that delivers the product at the end of the process, you know, there's also a role that they play in that sales process. Now, if you are the entrepreneur, I would argue that you're not necessarily the best person to sell, because if you as the entrepreneur are doing the selling, a lot of the time you have autonomy to make decisions on the spot, which is not always in the interest of the company. So if you feel that you're struggling to get this client over the line, you might say, okay, I'll give you 10% off, or I'll do this. And it's not something that you'd want to do, because if you're looking back long term, and we look at the financials when we get to the financial management program, but sometimes we make decisions in the heat of the moment because we don't want to lose this client. So we drop our price, so we commit to things that we shouldn't necessarily commit to. And that is because we don't have to go through bureaucracies to make certain decisions, because as the entrepreneur, you have the authority to make that decision right then and there. Sometimes it's advantageous, but other times, you know, you could be making a decision today, but it kind of bites you later down the line. Also, if you're an entrepreneur and the business isn't doing as well as you'd like it to, you know, you are in a bit of a desperate space, and nothing chases customers away quicker than a desperate salesperson. I think there's this thing that people can pick up. It's either in your energy or your body language or whatever it is. You know, it's the small things that you're not aware that you are radiating or giving off, and people are just, you know, you're saying all the right things. I can't find any issues here. I've done cross references, and it's just something in me that just does not want to buy from you. And it could be because as the entrepreneur, you are doing a sale from a desperate place. Inversely, if you are the engineer, and you're selling to someone that is not as informed as you are, you tend to use a lot of jargon and say things that sounds intelligent in your mind, but you end up losing the client as a result. The next person, or the next question you need to ask yourself is, what personality type am I selling to? Now, a couple of years ago, I did a course called Mastering People Dynamics, and they put people into 4 categories. Now, I know some people might be offended by this because you shouldn't put people in a box, and sometimes it can be healthy because, if you really want to communicate to the best of your ability and you've understood that this person leans more to what we call a fiery red, then you can connect better with them, as opposed to you just not going in there prepared and saying anything and looking for something that would stick. Identify what the person's character type is, and if you follow this model called Mastering People Dynamics, I think this is one of the easiest ones you can follow. There are so many that are out there. And this one speaks about 4 character types. The first one is what we call a fiery red. This one is the dominant type of person. It's the my way or the highway approach. I think if you put a face to this, you'll see someone like Adolf Hitler, where they don't negotiate. They are loud, but not necessarily conversational. The second character type you get is what is called the sunshine yellow. So this is, someone that is a social butterfly. They like being the life of the party. They're usually good at sales, so they don't mind introducing themselves to people that they don't know. These type of people are bored out of their mind if you ask them to sit in an office alone for a few hours. They like to be where the action is. They like to be where people are, and they like showing off their personality. Third type of person you get is what is called a cool blue. These are very quiet, introverted kind of people, very analytical. They tend to see things that other people overlook, and even though they don't have a strong presence, they tend to always look at the finer details. They read the fine print. And the last type of person you get is what is called an earthly green. Now, an earthly green tends to radiate this motherly, nurturing energy. So if you had to put a face to this, you'd probably see a Mother Teresa. This is someone that always puts the needs of everybody else over the needs of their own. These are the kind of people that they love, they care, they're always making sure that everybody is looked after. I think the best way to identify what someone's character type is, if there is a car accident outside, a fiery red will come to the scene and say, you call the police, you call the fire brigade, you call the ambulance, and get that done within 5 minutes. A sunshine yellow would see a bunch of sad people, and they'll say some things just to uplift their spirits, maybe sing some happy clappy songs, tell some jokes just so that people can feel a bit better. The cool blue will look at the accident, look at the tread on the tires, look if the person wears specs, look if the windshield was dirty, look if there's any traces of alcohol. Very similar to what a detective might do, but they tend to look at the small things that we as everyday people might overlook. And then the earthly green would go to the person that might have been a victim in this collision and ask, listen, do you need a blanket? Is there anybody I can call? Can I get you something to eat, something to drink? And always making sure that the person is looked after. Now, when it comes to sales, when you're dealing with a fiery red, don't waste their time with all the features of your product. Understand where they are, and just give them the benefits of why they need to buy from you as opposed to your competitors, and be gone. Don't waste time trying to understand what their after-hour preferences are, what they do on weekends, how their mother is doing. They don't care about those things. You come here, you come to sell me something, tell me what I can get from it, and if it makes sense, let's proceed. If it doesn't, then don't waste my time. A sunshine yellow, I find that you connect better with them when you stroke their ego, give them things that they want to hear, and if they're happy with you, they tend to buy more from the people than from the actual features or the benefits that the product can do. So increase your level of likability when it comes to selling to a sunshine yellow. When it comes to a cool blue, they probably want to know all the features, everything. So make sure that you are well researched with regard to the product and everything that you're offering over there. Earthly green, when you're selling to someone like that, understand what their needs are, because they are so exhausted by basically giving themselves to everybody and making sure that everybody else's needs are looked after. And sometimes I think they'll feel so appreciated when somebody says, how can I serve you? What is it that you need? Even if it means that you have to walk away from the sale, even if it means that you have to be honest enough to say, listen, what you're looking for right now, we cannot offer you. I think they would think more of you. And if they have someone in their network that could benefit from your product, then they would go to the moon for you and back, but you need to look after them. Understand who it is you're selling to, and this is only based on the people dynamics of this model. There are so many other schools of thought, there are so many other models out there that you can also draw from. But the key thing is to understand the character of the customer and speak to them from that angle. Someone once said that don't sell in your own language, sell in the customer's buying language. And part of doing that is understanding what their personality trait and type is and speak into that. The next one is, where are you selling from? This is something that I've put together a couple of years ago, and we've gotten such a lot of good feedback from it. And I won't go into too much detail because I think I'll build a video on its own with regard to where you're selling from. And I find that you tend to sell from 4 different places. The first place we tend to sell from is from the head. Now, when you're selling from the head, it means that you have advanced research with regard to the industry, the customer, the product, all of those things, so that you can give the customer enough information to make an informed decision. When you're selling from the mouth, which is the second place you can sell from, this means that you have the gift of the gab. You can sell ice to an Eskimo. You're just good at selling. These are something that the Sunshine Yellows thrive in doing. They don't necessarily need to have an advanced amount of knowledge because they are so easy to listen to, they are so good, they resonate and they connect with people so well. So they tend to not invest too much because they're always of the belief that why fix something that isn't broken? Imagine someone that is that good at selling is extremely well researched as well. Their conversion rate will be through the roof. By the way, for those that are still new to sales, if you don't know what the term conversion rate means, the amount of people you approach. So let's say you are trying to sell to 10 people and 3 of that 10 people buy from you. That means your conversion rate is at 30%. Just a bit of a side note there for those that are new to sales. For those that are in sales for the past 15, 20 years, just ignore that. But we catering to a lot of different people at a lot of different levels of the year. So the third place you can sell from is from the heart. This is when you're selling from a point of passion or from a point of trauma. So if you're going back to the example used earlier on, if you are selling alarm systems and you know that someone had just had their house burgled, but you had a similar experience a couple of years ago, you can sell from a point of passion. You can sell from a point of trauma. You can sell because you can connect with the person on that level. Your passion tends to shine through because based on the trauma that you experience, you can say, this is how this product helped you. And that is why testimonial selling is so powerful, because only 14% of people trust an advert, whereas up to 77% of people trusts a referral or a recommendation or a testimonial or somebody else's experience with regard to the same thing. But if you as a salesperson had a similar experience to what you are selling, that is when you can sell with that level of passion. And the last place you can sell from, which is arguably the easiest place, is selling from the brand. So if I am a salesperson in a shoe shop and someone is a big Reebok fan and they come into the store, there's not a lot that I need to do to convince them, because arguably they know what they want. They'll just want to know, do you have it in this color or do you have it in this size? The same with property. If you are a real estate agent, if you work for a strong enough brand, and we're not going to endorse any brands here, your work is substantially reduced from the sales process because there's a level of trust in that brand. And again, people can say that Cape Town is a little more brand conscious. I don't think it's the brand conscious part. I think it's the trust that comes with the brand. If you have $200 and you have the option to either eat at Mug and Bean, which is a brand that you're familiar with, it's a brand that you trust, it's a brand that you know, and there's a new place that opened up right next door, most of the time we tend to go with the brand that we trust. Not because it's a sexy brand, but we know what we're getting for $200. We don't want to go in with the fear and feel that at the end of this meal, I didn't get value for money. So trust is a big component when it comes to the sales process. What is your goal? Now, remember, your goal needs to speak to, do you employ a salesperson or do you look at the option of upskilling yourself? If you put all of that time and effort into your own ability and you know that your plan is to retire within 6 months, or get the company to a point where it is now corporate and it doesn't need your active involvement on a daily basis, then that would need to be taken into consideration when making a decision like that. On a side note though, I mean, if your plans are to go corporate, you need to put processes in place now already to get to that point. I believe that a startup or a small business is not a small version of a corporate. Corporate starts as a smaller corporate. A small business grows into a bigger, smaller business unless your entire operating systems change. If you're looking at someone like Jeff Bezos, and I think, we get so inspired by posts when we see how Amazon started in a little garage. Remember when Bezos started Amazon 30 plus years ago, he made a loan from his family which came to about $1 million. And 30 years ago, $1 million today, let's say it's worth $4 million. If you convert that to South African currency, that's close to 80 million rand. So what startup do you know starts with 80 million rand? That is a smaller corporate. I don't believe that Pick n Pay started in Raymond Ackerman's garage. When you're building a corporate, you're putting things in place now already so that it becomes a fully fledged corporate. If you are a startup very rarely grows into a corporate. So those are just things that we need to keep in mind when we are structuring our business. And lastly, what is your unique selling proposition, or what is the USP of the business? In other words, what do they have that your competitors don't have? Or what do we have that our competitors don't have? And I always tell people that when it comes to sales, you need to know your competitors well. You need to understand, what do they have that you don't have? What do we have that they don't have? How do we measure up in terms of quality? How do we measure up in terms of price? And how do we measure up in terms of speed? In other words, turnaround time. So those are all questions that you need to understand. I'm thinking back of Corp Cafe. When we ran Corp Cafe, we had to do a competitor matrix against the guys like Bootlegger and Vida and Seattle and Mug and Bean. How do we measure up based on price? How do we measure up based on quality, turnaround? But most importantly, what do we have that they don't have? So when people ask you, why should I buy from you? You usually give them the USP, the unique selling proposition. But also understand that your USP might be the most revolutionary idea in your mind, but in the mind of the customer, they just want something that works. When they pick up the phone and you're there on the other side, there's a level of trust and consistency that they can rely on. It doesn't necessarily have to be the USP that you're coming from, even though 80 or 90% of the time that is the one you lead with. But in some cases, customers just want to know that if I'm picking up the phone and I need something, you are there on the other side. So once you've answered all of these questions, you'll have an idea of, do I need to outsource or delegate, or do I need to upskill myself? Before, we'd always have a clear path. If it's hard skills, we delegate or we outsource. If it's soft skills, which means that it's more person orientated, we'd upskill. Now, sales falls kind of on the border between the two, because one, you're dealing with people, which brings a lot of people's skills into account, which is arguably soft skills, and it also brings the hard, tangible, functional skills into play as well. So what do we do? I'm putting together a program that will help feed, this machine based on the answers that you've given, because there are people that might still not have a clear answer with the way forward. Do I delegate and outsource, or do I upskill? And based on what we feed this little program, that will give you a better idea and will spit out some recommendations. If you are still struggling based on all of those things, maybe send us an email and we'll see how we can help you. And remember, there's no cost involved. It's free of charge. If you want to be the best salesperson you could be, or you want to give you a chance, or if you want to give your company its highest chance of success through more sales, then send us an email. Get started at businessfundamentalsacademy.co.za. That's get started at businessfundamentalsacademy.co.za. Also, if you are a business owner, if you're thinking of starting one and you'd like to join the academy, we are giving this away completely free of charge. So we'll upskill you in sales, marketing, financial management, human resources, the soft skills that are needed to take your business to the next level or to actually start a business. Again, send us an email to that same email address, get started at businessfundamentals.academy.co.za. We had to push the launch date a little bit back because we are opening it up to a lot more people that have showed interest. And if that is you, when you send that email, just put in there Academy and we'll know exactly what to do. Okay. Then I'm going to end off this podcast by giving you a few tips, because if you decide that you're going to upskill yourself or you're going to delegate this, but you need the person that you're delegating this to have the best chance of increasing their conversion rate by increasing the amount of sales that they could potentially bring in, I'm just going to leave you with 5 tips. And I'm not going to go to the basic obvious tips because that is easily accessible online. I want to share some of the things that has helped us over the Advantage line, and maybe it's things that could help you. So the first thing is be prepared to lose the sale. A couple of years ago, one of my partners and I, we owned a contact center, and we were in the process of closing a big deal. And the first question I asked him is, are we prepared to lose the sale? Because if we go in there with this level of desperation, that is almost guaranteed to chase this potential client away. But if we go in there knowing that if we don't get the sale, we are authentic, when we're true to ourselves, and they then decide, okay, listen, thank you for your offer, but unfortunately we can't proceed with it, I have a level of peace with that. So if you are prepared to lose the sale, you go in a little more confidently. It's like dating as well. If you're going to go there thinking, listen, I'm a good guy, I can give you a good life, I'm good looking, as soon as you must justify the value that you can bring, it chases people off. You might be saying all the right things, but there's just this thing that says, why is he trying so hard? What is he trying to compensate for? Am I going to get surprises down the line? So that's the first thing. Be prepared to lose the sale. The second thing is speak well. Work on your communication skills. The last thing you want to do is sit in front of a potential client and you and stuttering over your words and you're falling apart, and it just loses confidence because it indirectly tells the client that you don't know your product as well as you think you know it. You don't know the industry, you don't know your clients. And again, there are people that have problems when it comes to communication. And if that is you, in certain industries and in certain communities, it can work well. But when you're dealing with clients that potentially has to spend 8 or 9 figures with you, that want to know that there's this level of eloquence and excellence that you radiate when it comes to the communication and the sales process. So upskill yourself on communication. Whether you are a salesperson or not, it is in your interest to do exactly that. The third thing is speak in the buying language of the client. And we mentioned that earlier on, so I won't go into too much detail. Fourth one, and this is a bit of a funny one. Either wear blue or wear white. Those 2 colors seems to be the most trustworthy in the mind of the client. And as I mentioned, it's the small, minuscule things that we take for granted that could be the difference between customers saying yes or no. Again, you could be saying all the right things, but there's something about you that is just a little bit off. And whether it's the body language, you're using too much facial expressions, too much hand gestures, or it could be the color of your clothing. And there's a reason banks like Standard Bank and FNB, they use the color blue, because it represents trust. As soon as you are flagged as a salesperson, the level of trust already dips. So you as a salesperson already working from in the hole as opposed to working from the ground where the playing fields are level. So as a salesperson, people already has a stigma, and they already don't trust you. So if you can do that little bit extra to win their trust over, even if it's something as minuscule as the color of your clothing, right? By all means do that. Physical and all the other aesthetics, that goes without saying. Make sure that your teeth isn't yellow, you shave, your hair is done properly. All of the obvious things we're not going to mention here because that goes without saying. And lastly, understand who you are selling to. So not only do you need to learn to speak in their buying language, but also, and by language I'm not talking about English or Afrikaans or Spanish, but understand what gets them to buy. But lastly, understand their character. So again, if you are selling to someone that is red or fiery red, they have that personality, get in, do the benefits, get out. Right? So if you're selling to someone that doesn't have time, you say, listen, Mr. X, this is the product that we have. We understand that you might need something for this. These are the benefits that they offer, and this is the price that we have them at. We also have 2 or 3 other options, which I'm happy to explain. But, if this is what you want, this is my card, please give me a call. Straight to the point, no beating about the bush. If they like what they see, they will buy. If they need more information, they will ask. If they don't like it, they will say. If you're dealing with a cool blue, just understand, based on what we discussed a little earlier on, what are their pain points? What do they need to overcome? How do you need to navigate them through that process over there to get them over that line as well? So that is it for sales. Maybe one little bonus tip I'll give there: never badmouth your competitors. If somebody else says, listen, I'm already buying it from one of your competitors, don't say we are better than them at this, unless it is a sunshine yellow or a fiery red. When you badmouth somebody else that is competing against you, it shows that you have a level of insecurity. And again, that is something that will push them further away while you're trying to bring them closer in. So try not to badmouth your competitors. Unless they badmouthing them, you can make slight suggestions that you agree with what it is they're saying, but ultimately they need to feel secure that you are not going to be a repackaged version of the traumas that your competitors have given them. If you've gotten value from this podcast, particularly today's episode on sales, would you consider subscribing to our channel, giving us a like, and maybe sharing to 1 or 2 people in your network that are in business, that are in sales, or more importantly, people that are looking at starting a business. Get them to subscribe, get them to like, and we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Until then, goodbye and God bless.